Hey guys, Pastor Josh here. We're coming at you with another second helping. And if you're not familiar with what second helping is, we took the idea for basically Thanksgiving dinner, where you couldn't get everything on the plate that you wanted the first time, so you go back to get more. We just finished a sermon yesterday in our Playbook series, and there's some things that I didn't get to say, mostly for time, that I think are kind of cool and could be like a little extra for you today. Whenever you're hearing this message, just take it as a little bit extra, something that God might have for you. I didn't get to talk about some of the ways that we can practice self-control. In the message, I spoke on how Satan comes at Jesus in the wilderness and tempts him, and he tempts him with taking the easy path, the easy way, and avoiding the cross. And then I spoke about how God has called us to have self-control and self-discipline. What I didn't get to is some of the practical ways that we can do that. We can demonstrate self-control. And honestly, the best way would be to see what Jesus was doing when Satan came to tempt him. If you read in Matthew chapter 4 or in Luke chapter 4, when Satan comes after Jesus, it's when Jesus is fasting and praying. Jesus goes out into the wilderness and he spends 40 days without eating, just to focus his spirit, to spend more time working on his spirit and not feeding his flesh. And that's what fasting means. But we don't talk about fasting very often. It's not a common application in the church today. A lot of people don't ever preach on it. And it's because people are like, well, there's no room for fasting in a modern day world. When will we do that? I think we should be fasting a lot more, and we should be talking about it. The average Christian, the average person in church doesn't even know what fasting means, or at least doesn't know how they should fast or why they should fast. See, the Bible talks about fasting a lot. It talks about it 74 different times, and it adds prayer in there 14 more times. So this idea of prayer and fasting, and how important it is. Esther in the Old Testament begs her people to pray and to fast, to just be extra serious about an upcoming meeting she has with the king, where she's going to try to petition to save the Israelite children. There's a time in the book of Acts where they're calling new leaders, new elders to be a part of the church. And it says they confirmed them over prayer and fasting. When they picked Paul and Barnabas, they prayed and fasted. There's a story in the Bible where the disciples try to cast out a demon out of a little boy and they couldn't do it. And then Jesus cast the demon out and they say, Jesus, why couldn't we cast the demon out? And Jesus says, this kind of demon would only come out with prayer and fasting. So over and over again, time and time again, you see Nehemiah, his heart is broken for the devastation of Israel, of Jerusalem, in Nehemiah chapter 1. And it says he spent time praying and fasting over his heart being broken. So fasting is something that we should all practice as a way of just being a little extra serious, giving a little bit more time and devoting ourselves to growing in our spirit. So what fasting is, and now often in the Bible, it's referencing a time without food. But the idea of fasting was to starve your flesh, to put your flesh on the back burner, something that you would physically desire and crave in order to promote your spirit being stronger. You're going to feed one of two things. You're either going to feed your flesh or you're going to feed your spirit. So to fast would be to starve your flesh and to feed your spirit. And that's a huge part of self-discipline. If you remember, I read to you in this message, and if you didn't hear it, you can go check it out. I read from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, and the first part of verse number 27 says, I discipline my body and keep it under control. It's my responsibility to control my body, to discipline myself. And so in the Bible times, in ancient times, one of the best ways to starve your flesh was to literally starve, was to take food out of the equation because you love to eat so much. Now, fasting, if you want to know how to fast, if you want to get serious about your prayer life, about your time with God, spend some time fasting. And what you would do here is you would reject something or put something aside that your flesh craves. Now, that can't be a sin, okay? If you're out mugging people on every Tuesday night, you can't fast from mugging people. You can't fast from your pornography addiction. Those things are sin. You shouldn't do them. You can't fast from them. You just don't do them. But what you fast from is something that isn't a sin, but it also isn't necessary. So you pick something to fast from, and you should pick something that your flesh naturally craves very easily. So ancient times, they didn't have half of the entertainment that we have. So they would just fast from food, because although food is necessary long-term, it wasn't something you had to have every single day. It was something your flesh enjoyed. It's something you craved. It was something you wanted, but you could live without it for a little while. So find something that you don't have to have, that isn't sin, that you can live without for a while, and then fast from that. So today it could still be food. That's still a great one, but maybe it's your cell phone. Maybe it's games on your cell phone. Maybe you fast from social media and you say, I'm going off of Instagram and going off of Facebook or whatever. Maybe you fast from a hobby that you really enjoy, that's your source of relaxation or your way to let out stress. Maybe you fast from something that you enjoy in your flesh in order to take that same time and devote it to your spirit. Let me remind you of what Hebrews chapter 12 says, and verse number 11 is a great verse that he's just honest. The author is just being honest about our struggle. He says, no discipline is enjoyable. There's no discipline that's enjoyable while it's happening, and that's true. I don't want to fast. I don't enjoy fasting because I'm letting go of something that I want. So why would that be fun for me? But he goes, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful, exclamation point. Fast from something that's going to make you go, oh, I really want this. If it's a hamburger, if it's, just picking up your cell phone, if it's turning on Netflix, something that you would crave and that you almost do without thinking, take that aside and say, I'm not going to give in to that. I'm going to fast for 1 day, 5 days, a whole week, 2 weeks, whatever it is. God, I'm going to not do that. And instead, I'm going to take that time and I'm going to give it to you. The verse goes on to say, after you've been disciplined, after you've gone through this time, there'll be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. If you can train yourself to be disciplined, to bring yourself under self-control, man, how much better is it going to be? So I preached an entire message on not taking the easy way, on having self-control, self-discipline. And what I would like to have added to that message is what I'm giving you here right now on this second helping. Try fasting. I fasted before I started Harbor.Church. Kaylee and I actually came to the conclusion that Hyannis was where God wanted us to be after she and I separately fasted and prayed over what God's will was for us. I fasted and prayed before I asked Kaylee to marry me, before I bought my house, before a lot of my major decisions, because I wanted to spend extra time just drawing close to God's heart and making sure that I wasn't making a rash decision or that I wasn't acting in my flesh. Some of you have big decisions coming up. You should fast and pray. Some of you are going through a hard time right now and you need God's hand in your life. Like Nehemiah, your heart's broken. You should fast and pray. Some of you are looking for direction for your life. You're wanting to know, God, what's your will for me? You should fast and pray. Time and time again, the Bible talks about setting aside what your flesh wants, because you can't serve two masters. You can't serve your flesh and serve your spirit. And God's called us all to grow in our spirit. So here's what I'm challenging you with. If you want to grow closer to God, if you want to spend some time letting your spirit get strengthened, then weaken your flesh. Fast. Who knows? You might even start a discipline that you're like, I can keep going. I was fasting from social media, but now I realize I don't have to have social media, or I don't have to have as much of it. I don't have to watch as much TV at night before I go to bed. I can fast from some of the things I don't need. And then I realize it begins to lose its control in my life. Some of you haven't heard from God in a very long time. Why don't you take a couple of days and fast from all the distractions you have and give that time to God? When you fast, like if you're fasting from food, you'd have a hunger pain. If you have a hunger pain, it was your reminder, hey, I need to take a minute right now and pray. If you're fasting from, let's say, your cell phone, when you want to go reach out and pick up your phone and scroll, let that be a reminder. I'm not doing that right now, but instead I'm going to say, God, help me with this thing that I'm going through. God, put something in my life to encourage me. God, give me your direction, whatever it may be. Use the craving you have in your flesh to remind you to pursue your spirit. So that's my extra helping for you today. I hope it's encouraging, and I'll catch you on the next one. God bless you guys.